As Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman gears up to present her third union budget amidst the global pandemic, the focus will be on maintaining the momentum on structural reforms and a policy push for key priority areas that are driving growth. And speaking of growth, India's startup ecosystem has been cruising in top gear. 2021 was a historic year that saw 9 IPOs and over $35 billion being pumped into startups. The country is now home to 84 unicorns or billion-dollar firms, with more joining the club every week as valuations and sentiment have both been on the upswing. Like every year, startup founders and venture capitalists have put together a wish list from the union budget, from a more supportive tax regime to opening up large pools of domestic capital to easing of ESOP norms and a roadmap for overseas listing, which has now been long pending. It is a long list of demands. From a policy standpoint, the emphasis is on creating a more enabling environment, reducing excessive regulation to improve the ease of doing business. Hello and welcome to Young Turks, India's longest running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shereen Bhan. Joining me now to talk about the expectations from the budget are Padmaja Ruparel, the co-founder of Indian Angel Network, Harshal, Kamdar, the CFO at Sequoia India, and Vineet Rai, the founder and chairman of the Aavishkaar Group. Padmaja, Harshal and Vineet, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on the program. You know, before I get to talk to you about your budget wish list, let me get the three of you to tell me about if there is now a sense of nervousness within the startup ecosystem, given what we are seeing happen globally. There is starting to look like a tech shakeout, even in markets like the US, and there are concerns on whether the interest rate hike cycle that could start in March in the US could mean fund flows being impacted into emerging markets like ours. Padmaja, let me start by asking you, any signs of nervousness at this point?
I'm not seeing, hi Shereen, and first of all, thank you for having me. I'm not seeing any signs of nervousness. Our companies are still raising money. Investors are still calling in from around the world and looking at our companies, which is great. So no signs of nervousness yet. And I hope that we don't see that going forward.
Well, no signs of nervousness yet. That's the operative part. Harshal, let me ask you, the expectation is that there will be rebalancing and recalibration. And, that's par for course at this point in time. What's your own expectation?
Shereen, thank you for having us. The best companies are actually built during reverse cycles, right? And that's what we've learned at Sequoia over 50 years of experience. Again, this era of Indian founders is different. Unit economics are strong, and there is great fundamentals. So, we don't expect challenges if the company is strong. If the unit economics are strong, we don't expect the companies to go downwards. But like I said, every adversity is an opportunity, and best companies are built during downward cycles.
Well, we've certainly seen that play out over the last 2 years. But Vineet, what's your expectation in terms of what this could mean? Skyrocketing valuations, practically a unicorn being minted every other day. Do you foresee that continuing, or do you believe that there could be a little bit of a pause?
I think, Shereen, first, thank you so much for having me, and lovely to have Padmaja and Harshal here as well. I think the most important thing that all of us need to keep in mind is we are in a long-term business game, not really quarter-to-quarter game. And that actually also really in that sense leads to our companies or the investors who are trying to put money in, because while some of these changes, cyclical changes, quantitative easing, reduction, increase in interest rates will take place, long-term capital is actually far more immune to this than probably the stock market capital or the capital that's looking for very quickly in and out. So I think my personal belief is that India is getting into, we have probably hit an inflection point from where we will actually see this journey keep going forward, and it's a decadal journey. So I am not really looking at a 6 months, 12 months, 18 months kind of a run-up. I'm actually looking for a decade kind of a run-up, and that actually is once in a lifetime opportunity for India as a country and Indian entrepreneurs as a collective, where we have to not only think about building businesses for India, but from India for the world as well. And so this is a great opportunity that is knocking at our door today. And this, unleashing of
You know, you're
entrepreneurship.
talking about a decadal opportunity, Vineet, and what a start it has been. 2021 clearly, as you point out, has been a watershed year for the Indian startup ecosystem. But Padmaja, you know, every year we do this. We draw up a wish list for the government and for the finance minister specifically ahead of the budget. This time around, though, in terms of context, there seems to be a lot more focus on startups. We've seen several meetings take place. We've seen the Prime Minister address the startup ecosystem just a few days before the union budget. So the expectation is that perhaps this is going to be a budget that will put an emphasis on the expectations of the startup ecosystem. Are you going in with that hope?
Actually, Shereen, you're absolutely right. I think the industry, the startup ecosystem, the investing industry has performed extremely well. And that should be a huge impetus to the government to really force this even further. And one of the things that has happened last year, we saw a number of startups go IPO, number of startups raised, huge amount of money from global funds. And to me, I think this is very critical that we continue with this momentum and increase it. And that's the reason why domestic capital and angel investors, young HNIs, they start investing in startups even more. We are the fastest growing startup ecosystem in the world. I just wonder why can't we be the fastest growing angel ecosystem in the world? It will start to breed more companies and we'll have many more unicorns coming out. But for that, we are hoping that a number of things to happen, especially for early stage angel investors and VCs to start exiting quickly. And there are enablers we hope that the government does look at in the budget. Things like Section 281, when overseas companies pick up shares of our investors here. I think that's a real pain. So it is important to really get this out of the way. Section 78, where companies are getting acquired. After a very long time, we are seeing M&A happen in this country. And if we can remove 78, amend it, the young companies can carry forward their losses post-acquisition. I think these are all enablers for angel investors, early stage investors to invest more money because they see these routes, they see ease of exit, liquidity, which they can then plow back into the ecosystem and fund more startups. So I don't see us stopping at 100 or 150 unicorns. I think we can continue this cycle and really accelerate unicorns, accelerate not only unicorns, but I think valuable companies. You know, Harshal referred to companies with solid, profitability, top line and bottom line. And I think that's very, very important. To do that, we need to do a lot more. And I'm hoping this budget will start focusing on those things. But I'm not complaining. Every year we see something. I think we keep harping and it will happen one day.
Well, let's see what finally gets done this time around, but specific recommendations coming in there from Padmaja. Remove Section 281 and amend Section 78, which will allow for the carrying forward of losses when a company is acquired. But Harshal, let me come to you now. And one of the pending commitments that the government had made, it's been over a year, we still haven't seen any forward movement on that, and there seems to be a fair degree of opposition, at least as far as the RSS and the Swadeshi Jagran Manch are concerned, on the issue of direct listings, global direct listings. What's the expectation? What's the hope? Do you believe that we're finally going to see those rules being announced, or have you given up on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, as venture investors, optimism is one of our biggest attributes or characteristics. To put an Indian founder or to give her an equal footing with founders across the world, I think the single largest optionality or the thing that the government can do is to put the Indian founder on a level playing field with an offshore founder. An offshore founder, a founder in the UK or Germany or Israel or even China today, can list anywhere, can list her company anywhere in the world. We are just requesting to allow an Indian founder to have the same optionality for her, to put her on on a level playing field with other founders across the globe. What's going to break your noodle, Shereen, is most companies actually might choose to list in India, but the rare ones that are building, who have a niche market, or the ones that are building in India for the world may choose to list offshore. So I think it will be, the single largest thing to give the Indian founder a benefit, the optionality to list offshore, to give her an option, to compete head to head with the global world.
Yes, and that has been a long-standing demand of many venture capitalists, and as I pointed out, this was a budget announcement, but it's been pending notification as well as rules. But Harshal, the argument that's being made against it, saying that, look, it is going to be, in a sense, forget brain drain, wealth drain, it's going to lead to flipping of companies. You believe that that is a misconception and it needs to be understood better, because especially for companies, Indian companies that are looking at global markets, that are servicing global clients, it might perhaps make sense for them to list globally as well.
That's absolutely right, Shereen. You hit the nail on the head. In fact, to allow the optionality for an Indian company to list offshore might stop Indian founders incorporating their company overseas. So that this rule will actually allow them to create companies in India, keep the wealth in India, and just allow them to list overseas. Right? And this would actually prevent Indian founders or Indian companies from actually incorporating offshore.
Yeah, well, we will have to see whether there is going to be any forward movement on this front. But Vineet, let me come to you. You're a veteran of seeing budgets come and go. What's the expectation this time around, given the context, Vineet?
Shereen, so I mean, my colleagues have actually already broadly stated what the venture capital private equity community is looking for. I'm actually a slightly different kind of a guy within this broad community, so I will focus on what I have been trying to champion on. I think we have created a number of unicorns, we have created significant amount of wealth, but we are in a post-COVID world where there is actually the kind of inequities we are seeing, the kind of struggle for people coming from lower income strata that we are seeing. There is an important and very critical need to build companies that actually also serve the need of the people and actually take India, and I talked about a decadal opportunity. This is not a decadal opportunity to create wealth. It's also a decadal opportunity to share wealth or create equal opportunities for people. And so coming from impact investing, my ask to the finance minister, and I actually made the same presentation to the prime minister when I met him on his invite lately, is that government must accept impact investing as part of its own developmental intervention, wherein you can unleash entrepreneurship to solve real problems, agriculture, financial inclusion, rural water, sanitation, etc. And to do so, can we actually increase the fund allocation to a fund? Right now it's 35% for any fund, but if you are a fund that is working in some of these areas, why can't the government actually increase participation up to 75%? The other thing which is very critical and important is there is a significant amount of CSR capital which is supposed to actually help the philanthropic side. But if you can actually participate into the impact investing bucket, there is a chance that you will be able to actually increase that pool of capital that goes for philanthropic, because the returns that we are generating will go back to the philanthropic activity. And I think these are two very significant demands. My third demand is that government should try to study what is happening in impact investing across the world and to set up an expert advisory committee. And if these three things are met, I don't know what will be met, but I want these three things to be met. There is a fourth and an emerging area that I wanted to touch upon, and that is linked to climate change. Somebody who has been working on making impact on the lives of people. I have been continuously seeing change in climate making significant adverse impact on the lives of people. Whether COVID can be classified as a climate change issue or not, I don't know. There are counter arguments on both sides. But there is significant amount of cyclone, floods, disaster, drought that is taking place that is making a significant difference to the work that we are doing on the social side. And I believe the net zero, the commitments of 15,000 global companies to net zero, create probably $1 trillion opportunity. Our estimate says $200 billion. India can attract $200 billion of long-term capital to actually create natural resource-based biosequestration carbon credit. And that amount of capital is going to stay in India for long term and is going to make a huge difference to the lives of farmers and tribals in India. So if the government can actually set up, and I have again made this same request to the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, that if they can actually set up an expert committee in MOEF and my Ministry of Finance, is how do you deal investments that are coming to create anti-carbon credits, which is going to be a market that is going to explode over the next 10 years. So these are the asks from me, very specific asks, but I think these are things that could make India meet its SDG goals.
You're absolutely right. It's not just about creating wealth, but it is about creating impact, and we do need to ensure that that ecosystem gets the care and the support that it requires. But Padmaja and Harshal, let me come back to the two of you and just take that point that Vineet was making forward. He talked about climate change. Other sectors that have been the sort of, darlings as far as the investor community is concerned, health tech, ed tech, electric vehicles, through the course of this pandemic. What is your expectation in terms of additional support, providing much more of an enabling environment for some of these sectors which have attracted a fair amount of funding as well as entrepreneurial enthusiasm? Harshal, I'll start by asking you.
Thanks, Shereen. I think in addition to all these sectors, just as a general trend, the government could get parity between listed and unlisted shares, because most of the sectors and the companies you and Vineet mentioned are unlisted. As you know, today an entrepreneur pays 28.5% tax, which is 2.5 times on exits versus 10.92 on listed companies. So I think to not asking for exemptions or benefits, but just asking for parity would, I think, be the single largest impact that the finance minister could consider for startups, including for emerging technology sectors, right? In addition to those, I think we need a significant push for ease of doing business. COVID has shown us that court processes, NCLT processes, etc., take 8 to 12 months, which are actually a generation in the life of startup companies, including emerging tech companies. If we do a tax exemption for share merger, say when company A acquires company B and gives it shares in return and not cash, we should just make it tax exempt and link the tax route to an automatic route. Otherwise, it will take the company 12 months plus under the current rules to take an NCLT approval. We should also note that all of these rules were made under the prior era where everything was controlled by the promoters, etc. And the current crop in terms of founder, entrepreneur, is different and should be treated differently, right? Coming to ESOP, I think the single largest weapon in the armory of an entrepreneur is to give ESOPs when she or he cannot hire and pay on par as large companies, right? Now, employees pay anywhere from 35 to 43% tax on the exercise of the ESOP. I mean, compared to a 10.92% tax on listed companies, that's 4 times the tax for employees building these emerging companies, right? So remove the tax or make the tax on ESOP on par, make the tax on unlisted companies on par, and make the core share for share merger par, would put all of these emerging sectors on parity with the listed companies. And again, here I'm not asking for any benefits or any special considerations, just put us on par with all the listed companies.
Yes, a level playing field is what is being sought. Padmaja, I think at least 3 or 4 of our post-budget sessions, you have quizzed the team from North Block on issues like Harshal just brought up, the ESOP issue, much vexed, but hasn't really moved the needle. So do you have any hope this time around that we're going to see a change on this front?
No, hope burns eternal. I mean, without hope, we wouldn't be sitting here, for sure. I mean, I've been in the ecosystem now for 20 years, and we came this far on hope. But Shereen, more importantly, let me just share another perspective. I think there are 2 things that any entrepreneur needs. One is talent, and Harshal sort of alluded to that some of the changes that the ESOP norms need to be amended. That's to actually improve the quality of talent that startups can bring on board and retain them and get them to even make some money. But there is another perspective that is also required for startups, which is funds, which is money. And I think that in India we need to look at that from a different perspective, that the VC industry is really shackled. We need to unshackle the VC industry. The number of things that we can unshackle. For instance, we've just got this merchant banker required for VC approvals, for VC funds to get approved by SEBI. We have requirements of IC, the investment committee liabilities. We need to take the VC industry to be at par with the global VC industry. That's very important, because we are now building companies which are bred here, but they are going global. So similarly, we have to also have our funding mechanisms, funding structures to be at par with the global industry. We can't be restrained. This is a high risk business. We have to be able to unshackle this. And the best minds from around the country and the world are looking at startups and investing in them. If we can't attract them and we are going to shackle them, I think at some point we will encourage overseas investors to come and own parts of our company. So I think unshackling this industry, looking at ease of doing, setting up funds, running funds, making it easier and not difficult, and actually being at par with the global industry is very important. The US is the mecca of entrepreneurship. We have to agree to that, right? So how do we take it there? I think that is something which would be very important.
Yeah.
So some sort of a committee to look at perhaps how VC funds are structured, what are the rules and regulations, what can be eased. Very important.
Well, I don't know if the problem lies in not knowing what the answers are. I think the answers have been well discussed and debated year after year, not just on Young Turks, but, through the course of so many interventions with the government. So, it's really a question of getting the job done. I think the answers are there for all to see. But Vineet, once again, as I pointed out, it's a long list of recommendations that industry has sent in. Every industry sent in. The startup industry, of course, as we pointed out, has done its part as well. But if I were to, the government is constrained. There is only so much that the budget can take forward. The top three priorities, if at all the government were to address, what would those be between what we've heard from Harshal, Padmaja and yourself?
I think the easiest and the simplest thing the government can do is talk about equality, which I think my colleagues defined as parity. So I think if you can bring us on par with everybody else, and those sectors that we are asking us to bring on par, the listed stock market is much, much larger than what we are. And so bringing us on par, given the kind of contribution the space has made, $60 billion in a short period of time, creating jobs and services for the country across the board, and we have a Prime Minister who's being called the Startup Prime Minister of India. So if we have a Startup Prime Minister of India, it is a very small ask from the startup community, from the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, to actually allow us to have parity with those who actually already have what we don't have. And I think it's a very fair ask. It's a very small giveaway from the budget perspective of the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. But I think the upside that the country is going to see from the unleashing of the entrepreneurial talent to both the opportunities of the future and the opportunities of today, including the issues of equity and inequity that India faces, is going to be path-breaking. And I think, therefore, this is not really a challenge. This is not taking something out from one person's plate and offering it to us. It is actually taking the whole country forward.
Well, Harshal, Padmaja and Vineet, 2021, as we pointed out, has been an inflection point for India's startup ecosystem. Will 2022 be an inflection point as far as the union budget is concerned? Is this going to be much more of a startup budget? We'll find out on the 1st of February, but you're absolutely right. What you've heard here from the three of our investors, the ecosystem is not asking for stops. It's asking for parity, and that is the the message that's going out to the government. Let's see if it is able to distinguish between noise and signal. Padmaja, Harshal and Vineet, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18 on Young Turks. We'll check back in with you post-budget to see how much of what we've discussed is in fact taken forward. We'll take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment with more.